Chapter 451. Who else should I call next? Looking through his communication device, Kevin contemplated on who to call next. Now that he had called Melissa, he needed to think of who to call next. There were multiple people that he wanted to call, but since he was pressed for time, he needed to decide on who to prioritize. Scrolling through his contacts, his finger paused on a certain name. Octavius Hall. Should I inform Octavius? Kevin's relationship with Octavius wasn't very close. In fact, Kevin had barely talked to him. If there was anyone that could help him, it was him. Being the leader of the biggest organization in the human domain, he definitely had the resources and knowledge to be able to find a solution for Ren's situation. Moreover, since his daughter was coming here and a future prospect of humanity was in danger, there was a possibility of him possibly helping. No, this won't work. But after thinking about it for a short while, Kevin proceeded to shake his head. Kevin may have not known him for a long time, however, from what he knew, Octavius was a pragmatic man. Meaning that if he chose to help Ren, he would expect something in return. In the most likely scenario, he was going to force Ren to join the Union, which was something that Kevin knew Ren would absolutely loathe. Furthermore, now that Ren was injured and now that he knew that he was 876, there was also the possibility of him handing him over to the monolith. If he judged that Ren couldn't be of any use, he would simply follow through with the deal with the monolith, and Kevin couldn't allow for such a scenario to occur. Therefore, he quickly discarded the notion of informing Octavius of the situation. Damn it, who should I call? He wanted to call Monica and Donna. If the two of them had been here, they would have most likely been able to find a solution. But for some unknown reason, the two of them had returned to the human domain. Scratching the side of his head, Kevin continued to scroll through his list, and just as he was about to press on a random contact, a cold voice sounded from behind him, startling him completely. Call the Amanda girl. Who? Kevin's head snapped in the direction of where the voice came from. The moment his head snapped in the direction of where the voice came from, the first thing he saw was a familiar black cat jumping down from a tall cabinet. You. Kevin was instantly able to recognize the cat. It was none other than the demon that accompanied Ren. His wariness toned down a notch. Although she was a demon, he knew that she was contracted to him through a mana contract and as such also knew that she didn't mean any harm. Softly landing on the ground, the demon, or as of right now, cat slowly moved in Kevin's direction. As she moved, the cat's bright yellow eyes gazed in Ren's direction. Pausing a couple of meters away from Ren, who was still spasming on the bed, she softly said, "If you want to call someone, you must call Amanda. She may be able to help. Or should I say, the people that she can ask help from can help." Amanda? Kevin asked in a confused voice. Schwa. Black smoke suddenly diffused in the air as a cold and enchanting figure suddenly materialized before Kevin. With long black hair cascading down her shoulders, Angelica's delicate brows locked into a tight frown. Glancing in Kevin's direction, she repeated, "The only person that can truly help Ren at the moment would be Amanda. Tell her the truth and that Ren is currently on the verge of dying. She will know what to do next." Listening to Angelica's words, Kevin had many things that he wanted to ask, but after realizing just how serious the situation was, he could only comply with her words and turned his attention back towards his communication device and did as Angelica told him and called Amanda. "Make sure you tell Amanda to bring the people next to her," Angelica added as she watched Kevin call Amanda. "Okay." Though confused by the sudden request, Kevin nodded his head. Ring. As he was calling her, Kevin turned to look at Ren. Worry flashed across his face as he thought, "Damn it, why do you always do this kind of shit?" 15 hours had passed ever since her mother woke up. Because it was almost early in the morning when her mother woke up, Amanda, who was understandably quite tired, headed back to her dorm to sleep before going back to the Queen's quarters to meet her mother. She may not have spent a lot of time with her mother, but Amanda was not uncomfortable with her. Amanda wasn't one to like physical touch much and therefore loathed it when other people tried to touch her except for a select few. But somehow she was unable to feel any repulsion coming from her mother when she hugged her yesterday. Understanding her backstory and their familial blood ties in her heart, Amanda had already accepted her as her mother. At the moment she was accompanying her mother and Malin for dinner. Seated on a large wooden table covered in a long white cloth, a multitude of succulent food appeared before Amanda. Staring at the food, Amanda had trouble selecting what she wanted. In the end she settled for a crystal clear grape. Plucking the grape away from the pedestal, Amanda brought the grape to her mouth and ate it. The moment she bit onto the grape, Amanda's cheeks sunk as the juices coming from the fruit exploded in her mouth like a waterfall. Say, I'm still curious about something. Snapping her out of her thoughts was the sound of her mother's voice. Yes. Waiting for her mother to continue, Amanda tilted her head. Her mouth was still watering from the grape. About the thing that you used to cure me, how was the boy able to get it? Hearing her mother's comment, Amanda's brows knit. Actually, she had also wondered where Rin had gotten the fruit from. Because she trusted him, she never once questioned the validity of the fruit, but that didn't mean that she wasn't curious. She naturally understood that everyone had their own secrets, and that was why she never pressed for an answer. But if she said that she wasn't curious, that would be a lie. I don't know. Amanda eventually answered. Placing her hand over her chin, Natasha muttered. I see. You must really trust that boy to not have questioned if the fruit was valid or not. I do. Amanda nodded her head. From the moment that Rin had presented the fruit to her, Amanda had not once doubted the validity of his words. She had seen him do the craziest stuff and have even survived an explosion that put ranks to shame. Furthermore, he didn't really have a reason to lie to her. Maybe if he was trying to impress her, but Amanda knew that he wasn't that type of person. From the moment that she had met him, she had never seen him be interested in any girl. The only girl she had ever seen him trying to impress was Nola, and rightfully so. He was just too cute. Caressing her cheeks, a smile blossomed on Natasha's face. Interesting. To make my daughter trust him so much, this boy must be quite the charmer. Hearing her mother's comment, Amanda's cheek turned rosier. Before she could say anything else, her communication device suddenly started to vibrate. Twang. Twang. Amanda's brows furrowed when she sensed this. She then turned to look at her mother, who smiled at her. Go ahead and take it. Thank you. Turning her communication device on, Amanda looked at the caller ID. It was Kevin. She quickly answered the call. Hello. Amanda? Kevin's rushed voice suddenly sounded from the speaker of the communication device. Amanda instantly became serious. This was one of the few rare times that she had ever heard Kevin sound so panicked. Something was definitely up. Bringing the communication device closer to her ear, she carefully asked. Kevin, is there something going on? You need to come to Ren's room. Ren's on the verge of death. Huh. Like a thunderclap, Kevin's words powerfully resounded across Amanda's head as her mind blanked. She couldn't quite process what Kevin had said. Opening her mouth, she asked. Is it true? What you just said. Is that true? Yes, so come quick. Make sure to bring the people that are next to you. Panda novel do. Before Amanda could ask anything else, Kevin quickly hung up, sending Amanda into a state of shock. Everything happened so abruptly that she wasn't sure how to react. Was what Kevin said real or fake? She wasn't sure, but she doubted that Kevin would lie to her about something this serious. Realizing this, Amanda's heartbeat increased. Not again, she thought. Trying to keep her mind clear, Amanda thought back at the conversation before a few words suddenly caught her attention. Make sure to bring the people that are next to you. The last sentence. How did he know that she was with someone? Did Rin tell him? She had so many questions that she wanted to ask, but she quickly dropped them. The priority was saving Rin. Noticing Amanda's strange reaction, Natasha's face grew solemn as she asked. Amanda, is everything all right? Turning her head to look at her mother, Amanda opened and closed her mouth repeatedly as no words came out of her mouth. She then shook her head and said, No. Hanging up the phone, Kevin turned to look at Angelica. All right, I've told Amanda to come. Can you explain to me what happened? No. Angelica shook her head, quickly shutting Kevin down. This is not something you should be meddling with. She added. What? Hearing Angelica's words, Kevin's voice raised. Pointing at Rin, who was spasming uncontrollably on the bed, he shouted. He is right here dying, and I'm here trying to help him. Shouldn't I at least know how he got in this state so I can figure things out? Kevin was angry, and understandably so. He was trying to figure out a way to save Rin, yet the one person that should be helping him was telling him to not meddle. One of his closest friends was dying. Why in the world would he not meddle? Despite Kevin's protests, Angelica was adamant about not telling him anything. This is a private matter. If you want to know what happened, you should ask Rin after he is healed. Her words made Kevin angrier, but after thinking things through for a bit, He realized that her words somehow made sense. Right now his priority should be helping Ren. Since Angelica was adamant in saying that this was a private matter, Kevin decided to stop being unreasonable and proceeded to calm himself down. There was a time and place to lose his cool. And it was then the door suddenly swung open at full force and an enraged Melissa came in. Angelica, who was standing next to Kevin, quickly vanished from sight. Before Kevin could wonder where she had left off, Melissa's angry voice resounded throughout the room. "You better have a good excuse for telling me to come here and hanging up on em." Halting her footsteps, Melissa's eyes paused on Ren. Her brows knit tightly when she saw the state that Ren was in. Walking towards Ren, she turned to look at Kevin and asked, "Did he overdose on period tablets? I told him not to do that." Hearing Melissa's remark, Kevin's mouth twitched. "You think now is the time for jokes?" "Just saying." Bending down and taking a closer look at Ren, Melissa closely examined his body before taking out several potions from her dimensional space and quickly fed them to him. The moment she fed him the potions, Ren's body instantly stabilized, much to Kevin's surprise. Turning his head to look at Melissa, Kevin asked, "What did you do?" Putting the empty potions caps away, Melissa did not respond to Kevin. Staring at Ren's pale face for a good minute, she finally took her eyes away from him before replying, "I gave him a muscle relaxer to relax his muscles, a healing potion and a couple of other things, but..." Pausing, her brows knit. "It has only stabilized his condition a bit. He is still far from being in the clear." Standing up, she looked at Kevin. "What in the world did he do?" Chapter 452. Where am I? My mind was a mess. I couldn't really think properly. My body was numb, and the moment I opened my eyes, all I saw was darkness. A pitch-black darkness. A darkness that seemed to completely eat the world around me. Placing my hand on the ground, or what seemed to be the ground, I propped my body up. "What is happening?" I muttered out loud. Glancing around me and only seeing darkness, at first I was confused. However, recalling the events that had happened not too long ago, I was able to instantly realize that what was happening to me was definitely connected to the other Ren. This place, I have been here before. Once I made the connection with the other Ren, everything started to make more sense as I realized that I had been in this place before. It wasn't that long ago as well. Around the time when I had activated Monarch's indifference to test my theory and communicate with the other Ren. Once my thoughts paused there, I instantly looked around the place in hopes of finding the other Ren, but regardless of how much I looked, I couldn't find him. My brows knit. "Where are you?" I muttered out loud. From what I recalled, the last time when I called him, he instantly appeared before me. Perhaps it was the same now. Unfortunately, I was only met with silence. Just as I was about to call out for him again, I closed my mouth as I suddenly recalled something. Could it perhaps be the chains? Right before I appeared in this place, I remembered the other Ren being bonded by a series of chains. Was the reason why I couldn't find him because of this? This was a plausible scenario. Taking a look at my surroundings one more time, I took a step forward and walked towards the darkness. Even though I wasn't sure of where I was headed, it was better than staying in the same place. After all, there was nothing but darkness around me. Right now, my priority was going back. What in the world did he do? That. Hearing Melissa's question, Kevin opened his mouth and tried to say something, but he proceeded to helplessly shake his head. "I really don't know, if I have to be honest. I was coming back from training and this is how I found him." As he said those words, from the side of his eyes, Kevin eyed a black cat in the distance. At the moment, she was the only person that knew about what happened to Ren. Unfortunately, for some reason, she refused to say anything or even show up. Listening to Kevin's words, Melissa raised her brow. "You don't know?" "I don't," Kevin earnestly replied, staring straight into Melissa's eyes. This persisted for a couple of seconds before Melissa eventually gave up. "All right, if you say so." Then turning around, she walked out of the room, much to Kevin's surprise. "Wait, where are you going?" Halting her steps, Melissa glanced at Kevin. "Where else?" "I'm going back." "What about him?" Kevin pointed at Ren's sickly figure that was laying down on the bed. Staring at him, Melissa scornfully looked at Kevin. "Who told me to come here without telling me what type of situation this was? I only came here with the basic stuff. You expect me to have the right tools to heal him?" Reprimanded by Melissa, Kevin wanted to say, "But it's because you would have refused if I didn't do it this way." However, he knew that this wasn't the time or place to fight against Melissa, as he could only apologetically lower his head. Had you actually told me that Rin was in danger, I would have come here with more potions and preparations? Had you told me, I would have been able to save so much time, and now because of you, I'm forced to go back to get the proper potions that might help him get through this. You're right, I'm wrong. For every word that Melissa said, Kevin lowered his head and apologized. Honestly, all of Melissa's words went from one ear to the other, and the only reason he was apologizing was just to appease her anger. He really couldn't care less about her complaints. But he knew that there was a time and place to act up. Fortunately, Melissa's anger did not last for long. As she too realized how dire the situation was, saying a couple more discourteous words, she directly left the room, finally leaving Kevin alone once again. Click. Once Melissa left the room, Kevin powerlessly sat back down on the sofa as he let out a long and tired sigh. Turning to look at Rin, whose condition seemed to have stabilized, Kevin forced a smile. Seriously, just what in the world did you do to suddenly find yourself in this kind of situation? Kevin knew Rin well. He was an extremely cautious person that would try to not take any risks at all. For him to find himself in such a situation, Kevin just couldn't understand what had happened. Right as he was about to take another long sigh, a charming voice suddenly entered his head, startling him. Soon Amanda will come with the Elven Queen and her mother. When that happens, I want you to take their attention. Huh. Jumping back in shock, Kevin almost bumped his head against a nearby table as he looked around the room. It wasn't long before his eyes paused on a black cat in the distance. Did you just talk inside of my head? Kevin asked. Nodding her head, Angelica sat down on top of the shelf and continued. Once the Elven Queen and Amanda's mother come in, if they do find out about me, which they probably will since the Queen's perception is strong, I want you to tell them that I'm contracted with Run. Kevin's brows jumped up a little. He naturally understood the implications in Angelica's words. She was trying to tell them that if anything happened to her, Rin would die. Kevin did not doubt her words as he knew that the two of them were under the same contract. For her to say such words, it felt as though the Queen was going to do something to her if she found out about her existence. Alarm bells instantly rang inside of Kevin's head as he suddenly asked, "Do you have something to do with Ren's situation?" Silence. Kevin's question was met with silence as Angelica simply stared at him. So? Kevin asked once again. However, yet again he was met with silence. Just know that the reason why I called you first is because Ren told me to do so. Your job is to stop them from killing me. But why would they kill you? Kevin asked. However, yet again he was met with silence. Angelica's lack of answers caused frustrations to rise from deep within Kevin's body. All Angelica did was order him around without telling him exactly what was going on. Had it not been for his friend's situation, he would have flipped out by now. In fact, he was already irked by Melissa's attitude, and Angelica's attitude did not help at all. Calm down, I'm bound to find sooner or later. Since she told him that he needed to protect her for when the Elven Queen and... Snapping his head in Angelica's direction, Kevin suddenly asked. Wait, did you just say Amanda's mother? I did. Angelica replied, causing Kevin's eyes to open widely. How is that possible? Being friends with Amanda, Kevin knew about her mother's circumstances. About how she had left her when she was young to never appear again. For her to suddenly appear in Isanor, Kevin was naturally shocked. Opening his mouth again, he incredulously asked. How in the world did she appear here? That's B. Click. Before Angelica could reply, the door burst open and 3 figures walked in. Before Kevin had the chance to see who the 3 figures were, one vanished from the spot before reappearing in front of Ren. Bending down on the bed, a look of worry flashed across Amanda's eyes as she stared at Ren's pale figure on the bed. Taking a couple of seconds to take a good look at him, Amanda bit her lips before turning to look at Kevin and asking, What happened? For how long did I walk for? I really wasn't sure at this point. It felt as though I had been walking for over a day, yet at the same time knew I didn't. The darkness around me made me lose my sense of time and direction as I aimlessly wandered around the darkness. A thought suddenly occurred to me as my feet came to a pause. Does the other Ren live in this world? So his behavior made sense. To be trapped in this voidless world for such a long time, anyone would go crazy. I was already starting to feel that way, and yet I had only been here for a day at most. How long had the other Ren been here for? My thoughts continued to wander astray as I continued to move around the never-ending darkness. At some point I just continued to walk for the sake of walking. I had long stopped thinking and was just blankly staring at the black void before me. How long must this go on for? I wondered as I took another step. Is there anything else apart from darkness here? Just how big is this place? Am I walking in circles? Question after question popped up inside of my mind as my eyes dulled and my feet came to a stop. I can't do this anymore, I thought as I lowered my head. The loneliness and purposeless wandering made it hard for me to continue walking. What was the point in moving forward when there was no direction to move? I let out a long exhausted sigh before sitting down in the void. Like. But just as I sat down, my ear picked up a faint sound coming from the distance. Making sure that the sound was real, vitality quickly returned to my face. This sound, it sounds familiar. The more I heard the sound, the surer I was that I had heard it before. It didn't take me long to figure out what the sound was as I immediately stood up and moved in that direction. With each step I took, the louder the sound became. It wasn't long before the sound fully reached my ears, and I finally spotted a familiar figure in the distance. With chains moving all over his body, binding him together toward the ground, I finally saw Rin again. Seemingly being able to sense my presence, turning his head toward my direction, his deep blue eyes locked onto me before he softly said, "Took you long enough." Walking up to him, my footsteps came to a halt. My eyes furrowed as I heard his words. "Took me long enough? Were you expecting me? Didn't I say it before? That we'd see each other soon enough?" The other Rin indifferently said as he gazed at his arms and legs, which were currently being bonded by thick metallic chains. Taking his eyes away from them and raising his head once again, he muttered, "We just have enough time." Enough time? My brows furrowed even more. Recalling just what kind of state I was in before entering this place, I shook my head. What time? Right about now I should be on the verge of death because of you. But contrary to my worries, the other Rin simply said, "It's fine, you won't die." "I won't die." Hearing his words, I grew confused. Before I could say anything else, the other Rin added, "Yes, I won't let you die even if you wanted to die. I've already made the proper calculations." Chapter 453. Yes, I won't let you die even if you wanted to die. I've already made the proper calculations. This. Hearing his words, I unconsciously took a step back as my eyes opened wide. It can't be. He had made the proper calculations? Didn't that mean that he already knew that I was going to act the way I was going to act? How was that even possible? Furthermore, from what his words suggested, my life had never been in any danger. The only reason why I had passed out was probably him trying to drag me here. Confirming my doubts was the other Ren's voice as he coldly said, "Don't think too much. It's exactly what you think." "How?" I softly muttered, trying to suppress the shock within my body. The shock didn't last for long. Clenching my teeth, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then lifting my head and meeting the other Ren's gaze, I opened my mouth. "So it really was you who planned this whole thing?" I already had a hunch before this when I linked up the scenario with Angelica and Amanda's mother. The clues were there, from how Everblood had tried to manipulate her to come to me, to how she was able to have pictures of her mother back at the lock. Everything was a full circle and it all led to the man in front of me. Of course, everything was just speculation on my part, but the more I looked at the other Rin, the more I was convinced about my conjecture. As my thoughts paused there, my brows furrowed. If this is indeed planned by him, what would his real motive be? Could he be trying to separate me from the others? That was a plausible scenario, but I don't think it was the right answer. From what I knew, his goal was to create a perfect version of Kevin. An unfeeling Kevin that had no burdens and only aimed to kill the Demon King. That was the only goal I knew he had. Without a doubt there were other goals he had, but I had no idea about what they were. Wait. It was then that a thought suddenly struck me. Wasn't the reason why I was able to see him in the real world because of the damage that my soul took due to the contract breach? What if the real purpose in him trying to set this whole scenario up was to damage my soul? A cold chill ran down my spine as my thoughts paused there. Lifting my head, my eyes met with the other Ren's. "Looks like you've figured things out," the other Ren said as he calmly stood in the void with the chains rotating around his body, binding him down even more tightly. With both of his hands locked down, he continued, My goal was indeed to damage your soul. Upon hearing his confirmation, I became even warier of him. Taking a step forward, I coldly asked, "Was the reason I made the decision that I did because of you?" "You can say so." The other Ren indifferently nodded his head, admitting to every single thing that I was accusing him of. This increased my wariness even more as my brows tightened even further. If what the other Ren said was true, then didn't that mean that he had manipulated my emotions as well? The reason why I chose to forfeit the tournament and my questionable feelings for Amanda were also things that he had implanted into my mind. Why and when did he do that? It was back when you activated Monarch's indifference, seemingly being able to read my thoughts. The other Ren answered the question that was inside of my mind. Back when you used Monarch's indifference, that was when I implanted the ideologies inside of your mind. My body froze upon hearing his words. Did he just admit to the fact that he could affect my mind whenever I use Monarch's indifference? I already had my speculations in the past and I was able to confirm this when I met him a while back. But who would have thought that during that time I activated it again, he would take advantage of the situation to set up a few seeds inside of my mind. The more I talked to this version of Ren, the more apprehensive I became. Whenever I thought I was one step ahead of him, I would later find out that he was 10 steps ahead of me. It was frustrating. Just how much had he planned everything? I secretly clenched my fists at the thought. Unaware of what I was thinking, or at least pretending to not know, the other Ren continued. The choice of forfeiting the tournament was for the purpose of not allowing you to grow stronger when undertaking the contract breach. Had you been stronger, the damage that your soul would have taken wouldn't have been enough for me. Only at your current rank could I guarantee your survival as well as the optimal soul damage. The more he spoke, the number my mind became. The feeling of having every one of my actions carefully puppeteered to the will of someone else caused me the sense of loathing to rise from deep within my heart. Thinking back, his words made perfect sense. Had I waited until after the tournament ended, although it would have taken me nearly 4 months to reach rank, it would have definitely have increased my chances of surviving. Regarding Amanda's mother's situation, I could have easily said that I needed to make some preparations that required me to reach rank. My choice from back then didn't make sense. Slowly my heart started to freeze. The other Ren didn't seem to care about what I was thinking as he continued to speak. Regarding your feelings for Amanda, the only reason why I planted them inside of your mind was so that I could create a perfect excuse for you to act the way that you did. My heart squeezed when I heard this. Indeed, back then I remembered doing what I did for the sake of not hurting Amanda. But taking a look at it back now, I was still uncertain about how I felt for her. Compared to before, the feelings inside of my heart weren't as dominant. That made sense. Opening his mouth, the other Ren continued. I only amplified your feelings for her. Whether you like her or not, it's for you to figure out. I don't care if you like her or not. Lowering his head, the other Ren's eyes once again met with mine. Frustrating, isn't it? Gazing back into his eyes, I chose to remain silent. Tilting his head, the other Ren looked towards the darkness. Having someone control the flow of your life, it's frustrating, isn't it? Hearing his words, my brows jumped a little. For the first time in a while, I heard emotions coming from the other Ren's voice. It was faint, very faint, but I could feel a mix of sadness and hate hidden within his voice as he gazed toward the distance. My face changed slightly when I sensed this. Opening my mouth, I asked, "Why are you telling me this? What's your purpose?" From how he revealed to me that he had been manipulating me to how he revealed that he could influence my thoughts whenever I activated Monarch's indifference, what was his goal in telling me this? Usually, someone with a hidden agenda would never reveal such things, yet here he was, telling me everything that he had done. Was he just stupid, or did he have something else in mind? Especially with Monarch's indifference. Now that I knew that he could manipulate me through it, why would he ever think that I would ever use it again? Unless... A thought suddenly struck me as my head snapped upwards and I glared at the other Ren. Are you once again trying to influence my decision-making by telling me all of this? This sort of setup, it felt familiar. Memories of the monolith incident replayed back into my mind, or more specifically, the time when I was manipulating the commander into acting the way that I wanted him to act by acting in a way that made it seem as though he could predict my movements. This was exactly what was happening. The reason the other Ren was telling me all of this was so that I would be forced to act in a way that he could predict. Once I realized this, my glare intensified. But before I could say anything, the other Ren asked, "Isn't it fun?" Hearing his voice, my body instantly froze as for the first time since ever meeting Ren. A smile crept up on his face and a cold chill ran down my spine. Fun? I questioned, swallowing a mouthful of saliva. What was so fun about the situation? Plike, 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 plike. Taking a step forward, the sound of the chains on his body rattling against each other reverberated throughout the void as the other Ren neared me. Clank. He was only able to take a couple of steps before his whole body was forced back with a loud clank. But it was enough to near me. With a smile still on his face, the other Ren calmly said, "Isn't it fun? Creating multiple threads and setting up different scenarios to entrap the person you wish to manipulate into doing your bidding? Isn't it fun to watch them struggle as they try to desperately leave the grasp of our influence to only realize that they had just been running right into our trap?" The smile on the other's face deepened as his eyes peered straight through my soul. "Remember this. No matter what you do, no matter what decision you make, I know. I know everything. You think you will never use Monarch's indifference again after I told you that I can control you through it? Think again. There will come a day where you will use it once again, and it will be on that day that I will finally see the truth." Plike, 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 plike. Suddenly a familiar metallic sound reverberated throughout the void as the chains binding Ren started to move as they dragged him back to where he previously stood. Slowly, once the chains dragged him back to the spot, more chains sprung out from the ground as they dragged him toward the ground. Ignoring the chains, the other Ren kept his gaze locked on me. The smile that was on his face had long faded away from his face as his cold and indifferent voice rang out in the void. "I've already set up the pieces, now it's your turn to move." Following his last words, the chains binding his body dragged him toward the ground and his figure quickly disappeared. Before he disappeared, he managed to utter a few more words. "I'll see you soon." Plike, 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 plike. Following his disappearance, the sound of the chains rattling rang out for a couple more minutes before silence once again descended on the world. Whew. With my eyes closed, I took a deep breath. His last words, I understood them. Although confusing, I understood exactly what he was trying to hint at. The game he was playing, it was like a chess game. One where two opponents would try to predict and try to influence the other's move. So far, the game that we had been playing had been a one-sided one. Every move I made he had already predicted or had made me move that way. I naturally understood that I was at a disadvantage, but clenching my fists, I glared in the direction of where the other Ren had disappeared. Slowly my consciousness started to slip as I muttered softly. "You're right, it's fun." It was fun beating an opponent that seemed to have everything under control. Chapter 454. How's his condition? Kevin's gaze locked onto the Elven Queen as he asked. Although he looked unperturbed on the outside, in reality he was quite shocked by the Queen's appearance. But that wasn't the only thing that he was shocked about. Standing beside the Queen was a tall woman with long black hair and beautiful black hair. Furthermore, her looks rivaled that of the Queen. She was stunning. She looked to be a little bit older than him, and if not for the striking resemblance that she had to Amanda and the fact that Angelica had told him beforehand, he would have never been able to make a connection with her mother. In fact, he still couldn't quite accept this fact as she looked more like her sister than her mother. While Kevin was in the midst of his thoughts, the Elven Queen pressed her hand on Ren's forehead, and a thin green glow suddenly enshrouded his figure. Staring at him for a couple of seconds, the Queen's face darkened a little as her brows knit. Noticing this, Amanda, who was standing next to her mother, worriedly asked, "Is everything okay?" Her voice was quite rushed, making it clear to everyone in the room that she cared a lot for Ren, who was currently being treated. Standing beside her, Natasha, her mother, quietly observed everything as her eyes paused on Ren's sickly figure laying down on the bed. Did his condition have anything to do with me? He wondered. She wasn't quite sure yet, but her guts told her that the reason he was in that state was because of her situation. It made sense if one thought about it. There was no free lunch in the world, and to heal something as incurable as the Mindbreaker curse, there must have been some sort of big price that one had to pay in order to do so. Once her thoughts paused there, she looked at her daughter. Looking at how pale her figure was, Natasha felt guilt creep up inside of her mind. She blamed herself for what was happening. Had it not been for her own uselessness, none of this would have happened, and her daughter wouldn't have had to suffer as much as she was suffering. She had already lost too many people in her life. It wasn't fair on her. Taking her hand away from Ren, the Elven Queen placed her hand on her chin. Then turning to look at Amanda, she shook her head. I'm not sure, his soul seems to be heavily damaged. His soul? Kevin solemnly asked. Turning to face Kevin, the Queen nodded her head. That's correct, his soul, and that's what makes this extremely problematic. The Queen turned her attention back to Rin, who was laying down on the bed. His breathing was extremely thin. Waving her hand, the green veil revolving around his body disappeared. Had it been any other type of injury, I would have been able to heal him using the Elven Tear, but he is currently suffering some sort of soul backlash. A look of worry flashed across Amanda and Kevin's faces as they heard the Queen's words. Following this, they both simultaneously asked, "Is there no way to heal him?" Thinking for a bit, the Elven Queen eventually shook her head. Like I said, this is a soul type of damage. I don't have anything at my disposal that can help with that regard, as a soul is not something one should mess with. Just a simple mistake and you can obliterate their soul, completely destroying their existence. Before Kevin and Amanda could say anything else, the Elven Queen continued. Even though there is no way to currently heal him, if we find out the source of why he is in such a state, then maybe we can figure out a solution. Letting out a weak sound, Amanda's face bleached even more as she had to sit down on a nearby chair. She currently felt powerless. This wasn't the first time she felt this way. It was a feeling she was all too familiar with. Clenching her clothes, she looked around the room in hopes of finding any clue that might be able to help Rin in any way, but it was to no avail as she found nothing. The more time passed, the stronger the feeling of powerlessness became as she thought to herself. Is there really nothing that can be done? If even the Queen couldn't do anything, what could she do? Just when she thought that the situation was going to be a grim one, her eyes paused on Kevin. The moment her eyes paused on him, she immediately noticed his facial expression. Her brows instantly knit. Placing her hand on the armrest of the chair she was sitting on, she supported her body up as she looked at Kevin and asked, "Kevin, do you know something that we don't?" The moment Amanda's words faded, everyone turned their attention toward Kevin. Feeling everyone's gaze and scratching the back of his head, a complicated look flashed across his face. If you know something, say it now. The more time you waste, the more likely your friend will die. Mei Ling added from the side. Pursing his lips, Kevin eventually let out a long sigh. Before I say anything, I want you guys to promise me something. Say it. Turning his head to look at the Elven Queen, Kevin's eyes soon paused on Natasha. I'm not exactly sure myself, but I want you two to promise me that whatever happens next, the two of you must remain calm and not do anything rash. If you guys act rashly, then Rin might die for real. Everyone furrowed their brows upon hearing Kevin's words. Nevertheless, they all nodded their heads. They didn't have time to waste. Okay. Sure. That's good. Nodding his head, Kevin turned to look towards the corner of the room where a black cat was quietly resting. Honestly, he wasn't exactly sure about what was going on and whether the two of them would be able to keep their promises, but he had at least given them a warning, which was enough to make them think twice before acting. And that was all Angelica asked for. The moment his eyes paused on the black cat on the top of the shelf, everyone also turned their attention towards it. Feeling everyone's gazes, Angelica calmly hopped off the cabinet she was resting on. As soon as Angelica's touched the ground, a black mist suddenly diffused in the air as an enchanting figure suddenly materialized in front of everyone, shocking everyone apart from Mei Ling and Kevin. I was wondering when you were finally going to appear, Mei Ling said as she calmly observed Angelica in front of her. Ever since arriving in the room, she already knew of her presence. However, since Angelica was currently wearing a bracelet indicating that she was on their side, she didn't think too much of it and proceeded to focus her attention on Ren. The only thing that she was curious about was why she had never done anything since their arrival. Pudding was a demon? The one that was most shocked by the situation was Amanda. She naturally recognized the cat. She had seen her multiple times in the past, and not once did the thought of her being a demon ever cross her mind. A multitude of questions suddenly emerged inside of her mind as her mouth opened widely. It finally dawned on her. She finally realized why Pudding always refused to let her touch her. Why, you? Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts, and before the Elven Queen could open her mouth, Amanda suddenly heard a panicked sound coming from next to her. Turning her head, she noticed her mother staring at Angelica with eyes fully opened and filled with fright. What's going on? Amanda thought as she looked at her mother. Taking a step back, Natasha's face bleached even more as she stumbled back a bit. There was a mixture of shock and fear in her voice as she took a couple of steps back. It can't be. What's going on? Realizing that the situation wasn't right, the Elven Queen instantly became wary. Focusing her attention back on Natasha, she quickly tried to calm her down. Natasha, speak to me. What's going on? But regardless of how much she tried, Malin was somehow unable to calm Natasha down, who seemed to be completely frozen as fear clouded her face entirely. Realizing that Natasha was not in a state to communicate, Malin stopped trying and turned to look in Angelica's direction. Feeling the Elven Queen's gaze, Angelica ignored it as she continued to look at Natasha. Standing by the side and alternating her gaze between Natasha and Angelica, an idea suddenly formed inside of Malin's mind as her view instantly became cold. The temperature of the room suddenly dropped to 0 degrees as the mana in the air warped around her body. Turning her attention toward Angelica, Malin coldly said, "It was you, wasn't it?" Lifting her head and meeting Malin's eyes, Angelica didn't respond. The temperature of the room dropped a few more notches. "I may have not been able to sense it since it's a lot purer and more powerful than before, but now that I take a closer look at you, the demonic energy in your body bears a striking resemblance to the one that cursed Natasha." Her words may have been soft, but they powerfully reverberated through the ears of all the people present like powerful claps of thunder. Especially for Amanda, whose eyes opened widely. What? What did she just say? Amanda couldn't quite process the words that the Elven Queen said. Even though she wanted to refute her words, Amanda knew that she couldn't. For someone as powerful as the Elven Queen, she had no reason to lie like that, meaning that without a doubt, the demon in front of her was the one responsible for tearing her family apart. Suddenly everything started to become more foreign to her as she had trouble processing what was happening. All along, the black cat that had been accompanying Rin in the academy was the demon that was responsible for cursing her mother? Her heart suddenly squeezed and her face paled. She didn't know what to make out of the situation. Turning her head toward Rin, who was laying down on the bed, Amanda wondered to herself. Did he know all along? Did he know all along that the demon he had been with was the one responsible for her mother's curse? The thought caused Amanda's stomach to churn. However, the sensation did not last for long. Closing her eyes, she quickly calmed herself down. At the moment, she didn't know all the information. It was far too early for her to judge. She didn't want to immaturely come up with a conclusion before she heard the whole truth. Stopping Amanda from saying anything, the whole room was enveloped in ice as a series of sharp icicles encircled Angelica completely. Pressing against Angelica's skin, the sharp tips of the icicles caged Angelica in her spot. If she as much as lifted a finger, an icicle would quickly pierce through her whole body, obliterating her existence completely. Seeing that the situation was turning out for the worst, Kevin quickly shouted, "Wait! What is it, human?" Malin icily asked as water vapor escaped from her mouth. Meeting the Queen's gaze head-on, Kevin continued, "Didn't we agree to it before? That you must not act rashly the moment she appeared?" "Rashly?" The Queen laughed. Her sweet and melodious voice rang throughout the whole room. Glancing at Angelica, she asked, "Do you have any idea what this demon has done? The fact that I haven't killed her on the spot is enough mercy." "No, I don't know about the circumstances, but I do know something." Turning around, he pointed at Rin. "If you kill her, he will die." Hearing Kevin's words, the Elven Queen's brows furrowed. She naturally understood what Kevin's words meant. It meant that the youth before her had signed a mana contract with the demon, and if she died, so would he. This situation put her in a tight spot as it made her unsure of what to do. And just as she was about to come up with a decision, she suddenly heard Natasha's voice from behind her. "You can stop now." Natasha. Slowly walking towards Angelica, Natasha, who was previously looking at her with fear, now had a calm look on her face. Or at least that's how it looked on the surface. Then, turning her attention back toward Malin, she softly said, "How about we listen to what she has to say?" Glancing in her daughter's direction, she smiled. "You would want that, wouldn't you?" Chapter 455. Hearing her mother's words, Amanda nodded her head. Staring at Rin, who was lying down on the bed, Amanda turned her head to look at Angelica. A complicated look flashed across her face. She still couldn't quite come to terms with the fact that the cat that had been following Rin all the time was in fact the same demon that had cursed her mother, but she felt that there was more to the story than it was let out. Are you sure about this, Natasha? Malin asked while turning to look at Natasha. The icicles in the air trembled slightly. This is the same demon that stopped you from seeing your daughter for 15 years. Are you sure that you want to let her go just like that? With her eyes locked on her daughter, Natasha sighed. What other choice do I have? Just take a look at my daughter. Waving her hand, all of the icicles that were aiming at Angelica vanished out of thin air. Okay. Giving a cold glance to Angelica, Malin added. Just because I'm not killing you right now doesn't mean that I won't be doing it later. I'm only doing this for her sake. Under Malin's pressure, Angelica kept her cool. She wasn't a count-ranked demon for nothing. Despite the fact that she had been subjected to the power of one of the strongest people in the human domain, she was able to remain unfazed. Let her be, Malin. Natasha's voice rang throughout the room as she stepped in front of Malin. Then, turning her attention towards Angelica, she took a deep breath. Memories of her past surfaced inside of her mind. She could still remember getting chased and threatened by her, and it honestly frightened her. But for the sake of looking strong for her daughter, she remained composed. Can you explain the situation? There was a faint tremble in her voice as she asked Angelica her question, but following that, her words became more concise and the tremble vanished. Turning her head, she looked at Ren. What happened for him to turn this way? There was an awkward silence following her words. You don't have to hide anything. I can tell that it is somehow connected with my awakening. A complicated look appeared on Angelica's face as she heard her words. It wasn't long before she eventually opened her mouth. You're correct. Lowering her head, Angelica lightly glanced in Ren's direction. The reason why he's in that state is indeed due to the fruit that he gave you. I see. Rather than being shocked, a look of understanding appeared on Natasha's face. She then turned to look at Kevin. If I don't remember wrongly, you previously said that if something happens to her, the boy over here will die, correct? Yes. Kevin nodded his head as his brows furrowed. Seeing Kevin confirm her words, Natasha pursed her lips before turning her attention back toward Angelica. I think I get the gist of the situation. I'm sure you also have an idea, Malin. Yeah. Malin nodded from the side before adding. I have enough evidence to believe that Rin and the Demoness over here have signed a mana contract. Yes, and in the contract there was most likely a clause that stated that neither party could harm the other. Looking up toward the ceiling of the room, Natasha plucked her lips outwardly. She then crossed her arms together and tapped onto the right side of her arm with her fingers. Since he handed Amanda the fruit, we can conclude that the moment I ate the fruit and the curse broke, she, the Demoness, suffered from the backlash of the curse and as a result broke the contract with her, and was thus put into this type of situation. Walking toward Ren and staring at his sickly figure, Natasha placed her finger underneath her chin and added. That also explains why his soul is in the state that it is now. Listening to the analysis from Malin and Natasha, Angelica's eyes opened up a bit. Before she could even explain the situation, the two of them had already figured everything out. She wasn't that surprised by this, however. One was the Elven Queen while the other was the wife of one of the top executives in the human domain. They didn't get their jobs because of luck. They were quite competent in their own right. Placing her hand over Ren's forehead, Natasha further analyzed. Since he is still alive, we can already assume that the contract that he signed with... Furrowing her brows, Natasha's words halted mid-sentence as she glimpsed in Angelica's direction. The pause was brief as she quickly continued. Her is ranked between A and 3. Since Amanda previously told me that he's made it past the round of 16 of the tournament, we can exclude rank and 2 contracts, leaving me with no choice but to believe that he signed a Tier 3 contract. Once Natasha's analysis reached this point, her brows proceeded to knit tightly. But that would mean that he would be ranked around in order to survive the contract breach. Pausing once more, Natasha's head snapped in Ren's direction. This time her face had a little shock in it. Having already come up with a proper analysis of the situation, she suddenly realized something. And that was that the only possible way for Rin to have survived the situation was for him to have reached a rank of. But how was that possible? She was already shocked by the fact that her daughter had reached rank, but rank? What kind of monster was this youth before her? This kind of thought became even more prominent from the fact that she knew that he was around the same age as her own daughter. Slowly her mouth hung open as she turned her head to look at Malin, hoping that perhaps her analysis was wrong, but instead, Malin's next words caused the shock inside of her body to double. It's exactly like you thought. He indeed rank is. What? How is that possible? Didn't he get eliminated from the tournament already? Malin's mouth twitched. Turning her head to the side, she softly said, well, how should I say this? He eliminated himself. Himself? Why would he do that? Forcing a smile, Malin replied. Because he said that he was bored. While Natasha and Malin were discussing the reasoning behind Ren's elimination, Amanda, who had been listening throughout their whole time, powerlessly sat back down on her chair. So everything that happened was because of me? Amanda's emotions were currently a mess as she felt many different things at the moment. On one hand, she was grateful and even touched by what Ren did. After all, he did just try to sacrifice his life for the sake of her mother. But at the same time, she was also angry. She was having trouble putting it into words, but she really hated the way Ren did things. She hated the way that he just did things without caring about himself or what the others felt. Amanda understood why Ren acted the way he did, and it was exactly because she understood this that she felt the way she did. Had he told her the situation from the start, Amanda would have understood. She wasn't unreasonable. Ren had never taken part in her mother's situation. Furthermore, although she wasn't exactly sure, she could tell that Ren most likely didn't know about the fact that the demon he had contracted with was the one responsible for her situation. Thinking back, Amanda had a feeling that the demon Ren contracted with was in fact the same demon that had contracted with Elijah, the elective representative back at the lock. So how he met her made sense. She had always wondered why that demon had not targeted her again, but it was only now that she understood that Ren had taken care of it. Closing her eyes, Amanda bit her lips. It became clear to her that Ren still did not trust her enough. The realization saddened her, but it did not discourage her. This was only natural. Especially since they hadn't known each other long enough to develop a full sense of trust between each other. Oi! Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts was her mother's voice. Turning her head to look in the direction of where her mother was, she saw her with her back bent and her face a few inches away from Ren's face. Mom. Amanda immediately became flustered at the sight as she stood up from her seat. However, her mother's following words caused her to freeze on the spot. Boy, I can tell that you're awake. You can stop pretending. Raising her hand, Natasha flicked Ren's forehead. Ouch. Suddenly, having my forehead flicked, my eyes snapped open. The moment I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was a familiar-looking face a couple of inches away from mine. Caught off guard by the sudden situation, I felt my cheeks warm up a little as a bitter smile appeared on my face. That was because I was able to instantly recognize the woman before me. She may have looked like Amanda at a first glance, but there was definitely a difference. Looks like you're fine. Amanda's mother muttered before finally moving her head away from me. It was then that I was able to see the current situation in the room, and when I did, I almost wished I didn't. With almost everyone present in the room, including Angelica, I already knew that the cat was out of the bag. The smile on my face became more bitter as I suddenly recalled the other Ren's words. Isn't it fun? No, it's not. I muttered inside of my head as I silently shook my head. No, it's not fun at all. Ren, how are you feeling? In the midst of my thoughts, a familiar voice reached my ear. Without turning my head, I already knew who the voice belonged to. It was Kevin. Ugh. Moving my head, I tried to sit up straight, but a terrifying pain suddenly caused my body to helplessly fall back before I could even move a few inches up. My brows knit when I realized this. Just as I was about to try again, I suddenly felt a hand touch mine and a sweet voice reached my ear. Sit back down, you're in no condition to move. Turning my head, I saw Amanda staring at me with a smile on her face. I was surprised by this. Glancing in Angelica's direction just as I was about to say something, Amanda shook her head. It's fine, I understand what you did. I'm not angry. She wasn't? No, I understand why you acted the way you did. You probably didn't want to cause any misunderstandings, right? A wry smile appeared on my face when I heard her words. She had pretty much read me like a book. Yeah, that was one of the main reasons as to why I never told her the truth. Well, that was until I found out that my memories were being tampered with, and realized that perhaps those may have not really been my true thoughts. In hindsight, it was a terrible decision. Staring at Amanda in the eyes, I understood that Amanda would have listened to everything that I had to say with a clear mind. Amanda wasn't the type of person that ran away before she heard the full truth. Opening my mouth, I tried to apologize to Amanda, but just as I was about to do so, the door of the room burst open and Melissa entered the room. She had her usual grumpy look on her face. The moment she stepped into the room, her body froze as her eyes landed on the Elven Queen and Amanda's mother. Once her eyes paused on her, she tilted her head to the side as she had trouble processing the situation. Then turning her head, our eyes met. For a brief moment, the moment our eyes met, Melissa's eyes flashed as an awkward silence enveloped the room. Soon after, clicking her tongue, she muttered in a disappointed tone. "Ah shit, you woke up." My mouth twitched when I heard her comments. "Why do you sound so disappointed?" Covering her mouth, Melissa laughed. "Do I? Must be your imagination." Crossing her arms, her eyes soon paused on Kevin. After that, her eyes paused on Amanda as her face slowly turned to one filled with disgust. Her next words almost made me want to kill her on the spot. "And here I thought you were only going to stick with Kevin. Looks like you've got yourself quite the decent harem, huh? Fuck off." Chapter 456. Chapter 456. Returning to the human domain. 1. Ugh, I just woke up and this is the situation I find myself in. Melissa alone was enough to give me a headache, but the fact that almost everyone was here increased the pain in my head. Leaning back on the bed and dully staring at the ceiling of the room, for a moment I wished to slip back into a coma. Would rather have that than be in this type of situation. Unfortunately, this was only wishful thinking on my part, as following Melissa's words, everyone's heads snapped in my direction. I could only bitterly smile at the sight. "What are you looking at me for?" Raising my hand, I pointed in Melissa's direction. "Don't listen to anything she says. Especially when she's part of the harem." Huh. This time it was Melissa's turn to feel what I felt as everyone turned to look at her with strange looks on their faces. Opening her eyes widely, Melissa glared at me. Sensing her gaze, I slowly mouthed with my mouth. "Trying to ruin me? I'll drag you down with me." As soon as I said those words, I could vividly see the side of Melissa's cheeks tense. I smirked when I saw this. That's right, I may have lost the battle, but I won the war. Like hell I would ever let Melissa one-up me. Keith. Just as things were getting heated between Melissa and me, yet again, a throbbing pain coursed through my body, prompting me to let out a groan. This instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. As she was already seated next to me, the first one to help me was Amanda, who worriedly asked, "Are you okay?" "Somewhat," I replied with a forced smile. To be honest, I was anything but fine. Although I had survived, the damage that my soul took was significant. I need to find something to heal my soul. Though extremely rare, there were definitely ways to heal someone's soul. The damage to my soul wasn't to the extent that it would affect me in any way, but looking back at what just happened, I felt that I needed to somehow find a way to heal my soul. The sense of discomfort that it brought wasn't something I quite liked. Just as I was about to make my mind up about how to heal my soul, a sudden thought crossed my mind. Wait, what if this has also been planned by him? At this realization, my body froze completely. Ever since meeting the other Ren, or to be more precise, the entity inside of my body, he had always been acting in a way that made it seem as though everything was going according to how he planned. And so far it seemed to be true. Everything that had happened to me seemed to have already been planned beforehand by someone. From the incident back at the hotel with Matthew to the dome incident. Everything just felt so warped and altered that made me think of the possibility of it being something that the other entity had planned. It was only a hypothesis for now, but it wasn't one that I was willing to discard. If it was truly like that, then it meant that my every move was being predicted. Realistically speaking, the logical direction that I should take would be to heal my soul. But what if that was also part of the plan? What if he wanted me to heal my soul? But if it was truly like that, why would he reveal to me that he had purposely damaged my soul so that he could have more control over it? The deeper I started thinking, the greater the throbbing sensation in my head became. The other Rin entity, or whoever he was definitely trying to mess up the way I was thinking. So much so that I finally realized why I had never been able to get the upper hand over him. It wasn't that he had everything planned, but it was just that he was playing a psychological warfare against me. Just like now. Because of everything that he had said, I no longer had any idea how to proceed. Should I heal my soul, or not? Secretly, my fists clenched tightly. This was definitely not a pleasant feeling. He looks quite tired, I think we need to give him some space. Whilst in thought, I suddenly heard a sweet voice from the distance. turning my head, my eyes with Amanda's mother. Once our eyes met, for a brief moment neither one of us spoke. Then turning her head she looked toward the elven queen. What was his name again? Rin. The queen answered. Nodding her head, Amanda's mother turned her to face me one more time. Or rather, before that she glanced in Amanda's direction before looking back at me with a strange look on her face. Her gaze felt weird. All right, Rin, there are many things that I want to say to you, but it looks like you're in no condition for it, so I will cut it short. Lowering her head slightly, she said. Thank you. Thank you for what you did for me. Following her words, for a brief moment of time, silence enveloped the room. Raising my head and seeing that she still had her head lowered, I pursed my lips together. It's fine. You don't have to mention it. Most of it was the other Ren's doing, but that didn't mean I wasn't ever planning on helping her. It was just that it would have taken a lot longer. Even then, I would still like to thank you. I was already grateful for the fact that you were willing to dispose of something so precious in order to heal me, but after seeing the sacrifice you've made just to heal me, I felt compelled to do this. It's fine really. I answered back, feeling a little bit awkward about the situation. Raising her head, Amanda's mother's eyes paused on Amanda for a good while. Then with a soft smile on her face she headed for the door. Alright, I guess we should head back now. You should definitely get some rest. What about her? Just as she was about to leave, the elven queen pointed in Angelica's direction. My face froze when I saw this. As I had not yet woken up when she revealed everything to them, I had no idea about what had happened whilst I was asleep. My heart tensed when I saw the elven queen stare at Angelica. Just as I was about to say something, Amanda's mother spoke up. Leave her be. Huh. A strange sound escaped from my mouth as I heard her words. I wasn't the only one that reacted this way, as almost everyone in the room aside from Melissa, who had no idea about what was happening, showed a similar look. Recovering from the shock, the elven queen asked. How come? Instead of answering the elven queen, Amanda's mother shook her head. There is no point. Since she's now contracted to that boy, I mean Rin, all I would be doing is adding trouble to the person who saved me. But this would have never have happened had it not been for her. We don't have to kill her, but we can still lock her up. The queen replied, obviously displeased by Amanda's mother's words. Her displeasure was understandable. Being a queen, she naturally had to be more ruthless than others, and as a sovereign, being lenient towards enemies was a big taboo. Glancing in the direction of the elven queen, Amanda's mother merely shrugged her shoulders. She's a demon to begin with. She was just following orders. The people I should be angry about should be the ones behind her. Not her. Pausing, she looked in Angelica's direction. Her brows furrowed a bit. Don't get me wrong, just because I'm not acting up doesn't mean that I have forgiven you. Had it not been for my daughter, I would have loved nothing more but to have followed Malin's suggestions, but then again, such is life. Following her words, closing her eyes and letting out a sigh, she said. It's also my fault for being careless. Had I been more attentive, none of this would have happened. With a soft smile on her face, Amanda's mother took a step out of the room and left. The elven queen followed from behind. There were still obvious signs of displeasure on her face, but it didn't look like she would go against Amanda's mother's wishes. Following their disappearance, the next one to leave was Melissa. Still mad about the words I said to rebuke her, she only gave me a casual look before disappearing. After Melissa, it was Kevin who left after a simple goodbye. You should get some rest. Following Kevin, Amanda also left. She looked uncertain about whether to leave or not, but as soon as her eyes paused on Angelica, she quickly made up her mind and also bid me goodbye. Once the doors closed, the only people that remained in the room were Angelica and I. Lifting my head up with some difficulty, I bitterly said, "Rough day, huh?" Isanor Infirmary. Silently gazing toward the city of Isanor from her bed, Emma's figure silently rested by the side of the bed. She had a dull look on her face. Suddenly the door opened up and Kevin walked in. Walking into the room, the moment he saw Emma's condition, he softly sighed and sat beside her bed. "You're still up?" Emma softly nodded her head. Following her words, silence descended on the room. Pursing his lips, Kevin tried to strike up a conversation. "You know, I'm going to win the tournament soon. Once I get my hands on the elven tear, I see." "Don't." Before Kevin could finish his sentence, Emma quickly cut him off. Weakly turning her head, she replied, I don't want you to waste your chance on me. I'm only going to be holding you back. Use that opportunity to make yourself stronger. What are you talking about? Kevin's brows furrowed. Kevin, during this time that I had to myself, I came to realize just how useless I am. Not only do I always drag you into problems, but not once have I ever been of help to you. As she was speaking, the corner of Emma's eyes started to water. I know my limit. I will at most reach rank in my life, while you will sooner or later reach a rank that is far above that. Use this chance to grow stronger. If you really want to heal me, do it after you've become strong enough to get the elven tear without wasting all of your achievements. Clenching onto the bedsheets of the bed, Emma bit her lips. I can wait. If it means that you won't have to waste this opportunity that you've been given on me, then I can wait. Listening to Emma's words, Kevin didn't know how to reply. It was only after a couple of seconds had passed that he finally said, Emma, I never thought of you like that. Grabbing her hand, Kevin scratched the back of his head with his other hand. Also, I can't really do that. Why? Snapping her head in Kevin's direction, Emma raised her voice. Why must you waste your opportunity like that? Just let me be like this. I've come to terms with reality. I'll just go back home and handle the matters there. It's not like it's the end of the world. I can wait till you get strong enough to heal me. Focus on yourself and focus on helping me later. Raising her hand, she repeatedly tapped her finger on Kevin's chest. You need to set your priorities straight. And right now your priority is to become stronger. If you don't want anything similar to happen again, just grow stronger. So strong that nothing like this ever happens again. Grabbing onto Emma's finger, a bitter smile appeared on Kevin's face. Emma, do you know how I managed to get to where I am in the tournament? Huh? A confused look appeared on Emma's face as she heard Kevin's words. As if stating the obvious, she replied, by beating all of your opponents? The smile on Kevin's face grew even more bitter as he shook his head. No, it wasn't that. Lowering his head, Kevin let out a long sigh. Matching Emma's gaze, he bitterly said, the only reason why I've come this far in the tournament is because Ren was bored. Chapter 457, Synchronization. 4. A red sky enshrouded the world. Rubble and debris appeared everywhere as corpses and limbs sprawled all over the ground. Absolute silence enshrouded the world. Ha ha ha. Breaking the silence was the sound of someone's rough breathing echoing throughout the space. White hair, dull gray hair, and a presence that completely enshrouded the world. A man stood on top of a broken building. With his right hand missing and a long scar tracing down his well-built body, the man coldly looked towards the distance. There laid a figure who had similarly colored white hair and red eyes. With black blood seeping down from his mouth, and his body laying down on a broke building, the figure blankly stared toward the sky as a cruel smile sprung up on his face. It's no use, you won't be able to kill me. His playful words rang throughout the world as he proceeded to raise his hand. The moment he raised his hand, the world seemed to have come to a standstill as demonic energy gathered towards the palm of his hand, forming a small ball the size of a basketball. Stay put. But before the black orb could fully form, the white-haired figure with dull gray eyes raised his hand and motioned it in a downward manner. Prick, prick. As though gravity had been warped, cracks formed beneath the red-eyed figure as his body crushed against the ground hard as a crater formed beneath him. Even though the force of the impact was huge, the red-eyed figure remained completely unfazed as he gazed in the direction of the gray-eyed man. The smile on his face only deepened. Stop with your useless struggle. I've already won. Shut up. The gray-eyed figure replied as the area him pulverized into bits. Whilst this was happening, standing not so far from the two figures was a male with jet-black hair and crimson-red eyes. He was none other than Kevin. Holding on to the left side of his arms, he dully looked at two figures before him. Then turning his head, he looked at the world around him. Devastation. Wherever his eyes looked, all he saw was pure devastation as the world he once knew had been turned into nothing but a desolate place. Recalling the memories of how the world was in the past, Kevin stumbled a couple of steps. Having fought a terrifying battle for the past couple of days, he was on the verge of death, and right now the only reason he was even able to move was because of the effects of overdrive, which was slowly eating away at his lifespan. How did things turn out like this? He thought as he slowly moved towards the two figures. As he was walking forward, sensing his presence, the gray-eyed figure turned to look in his direction as he coldly muttered. Your turn. With the palm of his hand motioned downwardly, he kept the other figure in check. However, it was painfully obvious to Kevin that his power wasn't enough to contain the other figure for long as his hand slowly started to shake more and more. What are you waiting for? End him. The gray figure once again said. His voice sounded a little bit more rushed this time. Turning his head to glance in the red-eyed figure's direction and then looking towards his surroundings, Kevin's lips trembled. Is this the outcome that you wanted? What are you talking about? The white-haired figure replied back. His brows furrowed tightly and his voice became even colder. Clenching his teeth, Kevin pointed towards the distance. Take a look at the world. It's completely destroyed. Almost all of humanity has been destroyed because of your actions, and yet you don't seem to care? Kevin's voice powerfully rang throughout the world as his fists clenched tightly. For the sake of killing him, you decided to sacrifice the whole of humanity. What's the point of killing him when there's no one left? What's the fucking point? Quietly listening to Kevin's words, the gray-eyed figure answered. Because I don't care. You don't care. A powerful red hue suddenly sprang out of Kevin's body. The hue that sprang out of his body was very faint and almost invisible, but the pressure that came out of it was nothing to scoff at. You don't care about the fact that because of your actions humanity is on the verge of extinction? What are you doing? Ignoring his words, the gray-eyed figure dully asked. Raising the palm of his hand, Kevin pressed onto the space next to him and replied. Something that I should have done the moment I remembered everything. Like. Right as his words faded, much to the shock of the gray-eyed figure, black chains suddenly sprang out from the ground beneath him, clasping onto his legs and arms. Finally, for the first time in a while, the gray-eyed figure's face crumbled apart as he looked at Kevin, who was staring back at him. What do you think you're doing? Raising his hand, the gray-eyed figure tried to move his body, but regardless of how much force he applied, he couldn't move his body at all. The mana inside of his body had been sealed completely. Realizing just how much of a predicament he was, his voice raised. What did you do to me? Ignoring his words, Kevin turned to look at the other white figure who was watching the scene with an amused look on his face. Although he was also on the verge of death, there was a triumphant look on his face as he looked at Kevin and the gray-eyed figure. It looks like it's going to be another failure. Clenching his teeth, Kevin proceeded to ignore the figure. Keith. Stumbling forward, he could feel his vitality slowly leaving his body. The hue around his body slowly started to fade as Kevin's figure paled. Kill him now, end this now. End it. You know full well that you're the only one that can stop him. What are you waiting for? Once again the gray-eyed figure's words reverberated loudly as he glared intensely in Kevin's direction. A look similar to desperation flashed across his face as he shouted those words. It's always the same with you. Taking one more step forward, Kevin's feet came to a pause a couple of meters away from the gray-eyed figure. Plike. As he walked, the chains wrapping around the gray-eyed figure became more numerous as his whole body stopped moving. Seeing that his words couldn't reach Kevin, the gray-eyed figure stopped shouting. His face, which was originally cold, dulled completely. Lowering his head and glaring in Kevin's direction, the gray-eyed figure monotonously. You think this will be enough to stop me? I don't know. Kevin shook his head. But we will find out soon. At least for now, you won't be able to do anything. Spurt. Raising his hand, Kevin suddenly pierced right through his own chest. Instantly, blood leaked out from his body. Staring at Kevin, the gray-eyed figure's eyes grew colder. Howdy. The moment Kevin's life slipped away, the world turned white and everything crumbled. Ha ha ha. Abruptly sitting up from his bed, Kevin's breathing was ragged as sweat trickled down the side of his face. Glancing around the place, it was only after he realized that he was back in his own room that he finally calmed down. What just happened? He muttered out loud as he clenched his chest tightly. Keith. Letting out a groan, he hunched his body over as he felt his chest throb intensely. What's going on? The pain left as fast as it came, but the sensation was deeply etched inside of Kevin's brain as recollections of the vision flashed across his mind. Sorting out the memories, his mind became a mess. He knew that this was part of the synchronization reward that he had gotten from the previous quest, but he couldn't quite understand what exactly had happened. The number of questions he had inside of his mind only caused his head to throb even more as he held his head with his hands. Blinking a couple of times, sweat continued to trickle down the side of Kevin's face as a multitude of different scenarios presented inside his mind. Lowering his hands and clenching onto his bedsheets, he bit his lips. What should I do? 2 days quickly flew by and the tournament resumed. Seated down in the spectators' stands, wearing a mask to hide my identity, my face flinched from time to time. Damn, it still hurts like hell. Despite the fact that a few days had passed since the incident, the discomfort that came from the damage my soul took was still affecting me now. From time to time it would feel as though a large needle pricked through my heart, sending shivers all over my body. Unfortunately, as I was still on the fence on whether to heal my soul or not, I had to endure the pain. Are you really okay? In the midst of my pain, a soft voice rang from beside me. With my head still lowered, I forcefully nodded my head. Yeah. I'd like to think I am. That doesn't sound very convincing. Turning my head and staring at Amanda, I could only force a smile. Ever since the incident, she had been a lot more attentive toward me. It sort of got to the point where she was now acting like my personal nurse. I didn't dislike it, but it felt very weird to me. Amanda, I get that you feel compelled to help me because of what I did, but really I'm fine. Despite my words, Amanda retained her stubborn look as she refused to leave my side. And thus, letting out a long sigh, I decided to switch topics. That aside, are you sure you're not going to fight? Yes. Amanda nodded her head. Closing my eyes and leaning back in my seat, I softly muttered. I see. Before I could say anything else, Amanda added. The main reason I am forfeiting is not because of what happened. I'm forfeiting because I know my limit. My opponent is too strong for the current me to face. I know. There was no need for her to say that. I naturally understood the reason for Amanda's forfeit. The reason was because her opponent was none other than Valian, the strongest contender left, alongside Kevin and Jean. A part of me was glad that she chose to forfeit. After all, I did humiliate Valian in front of everyone. Though unlikely since Amanda had the Elven Queen's backing, what if a situation similar to Emma's occurred? A situation where she would almost die happened? Just the thought made me uncomfortable. I couldn't allow another fiasco to happen. Turning my head to gaze in the direction of the tournament, just as I was about to look for Kevin, I felt a slight tap on my shoulder. What is it? Malin wants to speak to you after the matches for today are over. Amanda's voice reached my ears from the side. Hearing her reply, my brows furrowed. Malin. The Elven Queen. Oh. I had a sudden look of understanding as my head moved back. Secretly, I was trying to hide the smile that was threatening to appear on my face. It's time I get what I want, right? As I've previously mentioned, there was a reason why I wanted to participate in the tournament, and the only reason why I forfeited was because I knew that I could still get it without winning. Most likely, at the moment the Elven Queen had called for me in order to thank me. Was definitely planning on using this situation to my advantage. Snapping me out of my thoughts was the boisterous sound of the crowd cheering as I saw Jin's and Kevin's profiles suddenly appear on the large projections. Oh, it looks like Kevin and Jean both passed the round. Standing up, I clapped with the crowd. The matches had not even lasted a couple of minutes and they had already won. That was really impressive. Patting my hands together, I stretched my shoulders and glanced in the direction of where the Elven Queen sat. Guess I need to get ready to meet the Queen and claim me rewards.